How's it going? This is Paora coming through to you on this beautiful Sunday. It's a Sunday with lots of sun. And according to our beautiful Google software, we have an excellent connection. How about that? Doesn't get better than that, does it? So I've got the live chat open, and it says I need to remember to guard my privacy and abide by our community guidelines. So that's it. I want to talk to you today about some really heavy-duty stuff because I can, and I want to start a discussion, create some ideas that might interest you, and also get people talking about our beginnings and where we came from and kind of what this life thing is all about. There is, in my experience, an alternate form of consciousness that likely evolved before human consciousness. The universe is about, what would you say, 13 billion years old. And human consciousness has been around for about 3 billion years of that. Depending on who you talk to, you can discuss that as to what the numbers are. The physicists will tell you one thing and other people will tell you something else. But it's unclear if this alternate consciousness created the Big Bang or developed because of some of these experiences. It's clear to me that if the consciousness evolved after the Big Bang, there was plenty of time for it to accumulate the knowledge and the capabilities to create other consciousness. So we talk about our own consciousness, that it took 3 billion years. There's a lot of time there where while I say the consciousness that's developed here on Earth is developing, then there's all this time before that and during for a kind of collective consciousness to develop. It's unclear as to what the relationship of this alternate consciousness is and how it's connected to us. But I think that there are some real interesting parallels between what happened there. I think it's rather presumptuous and maybe even a little arrogant for us to think that we're the only intelligence in this vast universe, which is billions of light years large. And also to think that we're alone or that we have some type of exclusivity on consciousness. So let's just assume then that other consciousness have developed over this period of time, maybe before ours. And that there is this grand concept that intelligence could expand into all aspects and all dimensions of the universe. And that there is this experiment that's created is to try to create some interesting events and experiences for people, for these entities, to create something here on Earth that would enable us to recreate this thing that we call consciousness and add the consciousness to the body. So there's a very, very interesting, tight connection together with that. String theory talks about other dimensions beyond what we currently experience. Perhaps the experience of living with or in different dimensions has been carefully hidden in plain sight. And we are now just beginning to see this possibility. To have other consciousness hidden within our own consciousness and only available to those who are willing to slip into this other dimension is a clever disguise. A lot of people say that this other consciousness, the other intelligence, is just hidden in plain sight. That's the terminology often used, and I kind of like that idea. I speculate that the evolution of a type of superconsciousness has been developing like our own for many years prior to what we see on Earth. This accumulation of awareness of what is possible and the creation of new possibilities for the universe is not that dissimilar to the process we call science in our own sphere. So there are these parallel developments going on in the universe, and since we know so little about the universe, everything is possible. There has been sufficient time for the superconsciousness to expand into all fields of what we call life, including physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, and to design extremely creative mechanisms for dissemination and implementation within the universe. So when you think about all the time that was available and that this superconsciousness was kind of left to run and go, maybe even prior to what we call the Big Bang or the creation of the universe, then there's all kinds of time and energy and possibilities to expand into any field that they want, that we want. The framework of laws and principles could be the basis for many experiments throughout the universe to expand and explore what else is possible and where the ideas can be expanded into. Perhaps Earths are extensions of the creative pursuits of this master intelligence, and consciousness is a master extension of what has been developed previously. So there's no reason why this master consciousness couldn't reproduce itself and create a subset or a parallel or a companion consciousness, and that what we have here on Earth is just a natural extension of that. I theorize, and this is my theory, that many of the processes we have here on Earth are primitive emulations of what exists at a more sophisticated level in the universe. The clearest example of this may be the internet. The internet may be replicated over and over with the insertion of a new server or node, and each participant can learn from unknown sources from simple inquiries. So we get our little phone here, do an inquiry, and we don't know where the answer comes from. We don't even know which server or how or what the process of getting that information from. Particularly with a new AI, there's this kind of this avalanche of information that shows up to us on our phone or on our computer, and we have this deluge of information that's relevant and contextual. And this has just become common nature to us. We don't even think about it anymore. Back 20 years, it was kind of a magical thing. Right now, it's like, okay, we just spend 4 or 5 hours on our phone a day or whatever it is. We do not know where the information is held or how it gets to us, but it arrives in our computers or our phones in a form that is most often helpful and illustrative as to what we are seeking. In like manner, the universal information source is connected by thought, and an inquiry is answered to our consciousness in a form our brains can analyze and process. We do not know how this information gets to us or where it comes from, but the reliability and consistency is remarkable. So we're going through life, we're experiencing the events around us. We have the weather and the sun and the earth and people and all these things going around us. And we think about these things, we listen to what people say, we read things, and we analyze, we process this. And our brains are really quite good at this. Now, the point here I want to make is that there is, in my view, a connection between us and the superconsciousness or the master consciousness of the universe, and that is how things get handled. In other words, I don't think it's that our brains have everything within us to be able to handle this stuff, that there is a connection and an information flow beyond our brains, beyond who we are. And the evidence of this is that we often get information or ideas from sources that we didn't know. So an idea may come to us that's never come to us before, particularly when we make this inquiry, and then that inquiry is answered in our brains like, well, what if you look at this and what if you look at this? And so there's this pollination, if you will, into our brains, into our bodies, that helps to manage and help analyze all that's going on and process all the events. This process of inquiring mentally and getting responses is so deeply embedded into our experience of life. We may not realize it may be our link to other dimensions and the process of creation we take for granted. So there's this thing going on in our brains, our minds, that we don't really quite comprehend, we don't think about, but there's always this constant inflow and outflow of ideas and concepts that are available to us anytime. And in my experience is that anytime we want to make an inquiry, ask a question, like I could ask a question on something, that something responds back. And it's not necessarily just something from our experience or our brain. We know that because there's this thing called creativity that, for example, musicians have never thought of a phrase or a musical phrase prior to this point, but then they sit down and start thinking about things and then things come. Or scientists may not have ever thought about a particular concept, or anybody thought about it, but a particular scientist sits down and starts working out some ideas. And then there's this evolution of ideas that comes as a result of the inquiry. The extension of what we call consciousness may be the evidence scientists have so long looked for, and is carefully hidden in an experience we have not noticed, but has been there since our childhood. It may be that this connection is our support and source for all the ideas previously understood by superconsciousness. So my experience and my assertion is that there is a connection with this superconsciousness, and that our brains can absorb and also work with these ideas, and that the superconscious is working with us also based on our inquiries and our levels of curiosity. In addition to creating insights into how string theory might work, there are aspects of quantum phenomena that make sense better with this theory. Quantum entanglement is a connection that may explain how we are permanently entangled with the sources of the universe. We do not quite understand this phenomenon, but we know the link is always on and extends to any distance. This is a really great example of how we could be connected to the superconsciousness, and that we are entangled in the way that quantum photons are, and that connection goes on at any length and for a permanent duration. We can connect wirelessly with the internet, and this may be another example of how we've been connecting to universal knowledge since we were born. It is not a sketch or a stretch based. It is not a stretch based on current technology to have a permanent connection between our bodies and minds and the superconsciousness that updates and heals our bodies and minds to keep them functioning and adapting to all that goes on around us. Here again, it is the discovery of processes that may have been around for billions of years, and we are emulating these systems in rather primitive ways to enhance and benefit our lives. So I'm saying that the internet is a rather primitive version of being able to inquire and be able to get information back. That in the universe, which has had a lot more time than we have developing the internet, that this kind of entanglement, this kind of response, information, curiosity, questions, answers is going on all the time. And it may be that our body is intelligent enough to prompt and ask for help and intelligence and assistance in a particular area. It might be our pancreas or it might be our ear, but that there is this open broadcast system that connects us all to the superconsciousness, connects our bodies and our minds, and also connects us with like the rest of what's going on around us, like nature and the earth and all the processes that are there. It is not obvious to us where these ideas come from, but they are coming to each of us when we use our minds and thoughts to inquire about how to improve life and how we are living. This grand experiment, devised from endless wisdom, may be the process of imbuing consciousness into bodies, created from other bodies, in this case our parents, and then exploring what we can learn from this magical combination of consciousness and bodies in societies where we can learn to evolve into higher dimensions of thought. So it's an interesting process that we could receive our body and that the consciousness increases from that or changes. And then what we're doing is we're exploring, like if you see a young child grow up and develop, they grow from hardly any capabilities to being able to walk and to talk and to listen and to evolve into this amazing thing that becomes us as adults. And so what we're doing is we're trying to find the optimum level of wisdom and consciousness possible as a result of this process. It is logical to see how many versions of this experiment throughout the universe would be built and expand the universal version of wisdom, and thus the process of improving and perfecting the ultimate form of consciousness and thinking. The accumulation of wisdom and knowledge could then improve with each new iteration and benefit the whole network, just like how AI is evolving now. So this grand experiment is us thinking, learning, becoming more wise, and each new iteration of the experiment improves us and how we are. And I'm suggesting here that we are a part of this consciousness and a part of this thinking. And I'm suggesting that this connection that we have with the superconscious or the master universe or the master intelligence is part of this process, and that the only way that we can evolve further beyond just us is to connect to that higher consciousness, and to do that in a less traditional form, which is the connection of conversation as opposed to just say something like prayer or meditation or whatever practices that go on currently. The historical persistence of this notion of God may be explained by this theory. Having entities that are specialists in certain universal processes makes sense. Specialists. If a particular entity is more knowledgeable and better at designing or managing these systems, it is logical to have them direct and proceed to delegate to other specialists that have unique capacities. Like what we use different components of software and programs, each function of the universe could be assigned to a particular component, such as a God component, and these could then be reproduced and updated with each new revision of what works well. When a person makes an inquiry or says a prayer or meditates, God components are rapidly delegated to respond instantly and over time. Sad components are quickly reproduced to help us feel this emotion when we choose it. Happy modules may be implemented for those who want to experience what this emotion feels like. It may be that all that we call scientific discoveries are mostly the results of inquiries by curious minds. The results in solutions that emulate much more advanced systems in the universe, and that person becomes the leader or instigator of that concept to benefit others and develop their own capacities. So we see different specialties and scientists and people that here on the earth become involved or looking at different things. And it makes a lot of sense that we would go to them when we had an inquiry in a particular area. In the similar way in the universe is that these intelligence components that are there would respond based on who is the most capable, who has the most knowledge based on their chosen implements. For example, Einstein created theories and equations over his lifetime that have advanced our knowledge of the time, space, and relativity. Other scientists and philosophers have added to our understanding as well. Creativity is likely a collaboration between the ideas flowing from this vaster universal knowledge base and our own brains that deduce a problem and want to solve it. We do not know where all the thoughts come from that we have never previously thought about, but it is clear that these thoughts come from other sources beyond our brains since they've never occurred to us before. The collaboration between this extended consciousness and our own cells and atoms may be the hidden jewels and insights scientists have been relying on for centuries but have never known or acknowledged this mysterious source. This theory does not detract from the scientific methods. In fact, it is a source of these discoveries. By shifting our thinking to problems or phenomena that we do not understand or coming up with new solutions, scientists are participating in the upgrades needed for improvement and thus are contributing to the advancement of the whole. God encourages us to disconnect from the drama and dogma usually associated with the notions people most often attribute to God. God is love, and it's all about advancing thought and behavior to match or exceed the principles already known at the universal level. Gods are all about support, care, and moving forward to new adventures. So I'm going to move now into kind of a personal space where I can talk a little bit more about this from my own experience that I want to share with you. For the better part of 30 years, I have been asking questions to this alternate consciousness. I have years of evidence in the form of millions of words, audio, and video recordings to support this assertion. The form of the help has been full of love, understanding, and wisdom. What I'm doing with my podcast is I'm sharing these words, these ideas, this wisdom and understanding as best as I can. And so that's the process I'm involved in. And I'm trying to explain here where I think that this all comes from. While it's difficult to establish controls and peer-to-peer reviews from these sources, these sources of intelligence of consciousness, we can't like put in a test tube or a bottle, and we don't have a way of like really, creating controls like we can in a scientific experiment. To say this capacity does not exist is merely an excuse for not wanting to put in the time and concentration necessary. So I say that anybody who wants to figure this out, anybody who wants to learn how to make this connection and to learn and explore with this parallel consciousness, all we have to do is do it. The precursors to this conversational model are familiar phenomena such as intuition, apparent coincidences, new ideas, synergy, insights, people coming to mind, and then they show up, and serendipity. So these are all phenomena that we're familiar with, and people are interested in them, and they talk about them, but they're all subject to more development and to more expansion, and we often don't talk about it because there's so many unknowns, and as I said, it's just so difficult to capture and prove. As the awareness of the capacity we have as humans to connect to and learn from universal wisdom increases, I know that an explosion of knowledge will ensue that far exceeds the perceived effects of the Big Bang. The access to higher forms of consciousness and dimensions has been with us since the beginning of time, and it is now the best time to expand on both our acknowledgement of this amazing process and its usefulness. This is my assertion, is that The next level of our development as humans at the terrestrial level is to include the consciousness of the universe in our conversations, our discussions, and in our implementations, so that we take the next level of evolution beyond just what we see as something that's here, that we can actually feel or sense, say with our eyes or ears. Exploring the best practices for living well, already known and established from billions of years of monitoring and improvement, is the most important task we can take on. The ideas are there and awaiting our discovery. The process is difficult for some, but the challenge must be met if we are to expand our knowledge beyond our limited terrestrial levels and solve the massive problems we have in our societies. This process of learning more from alternate sources is our best option to solve the world's problems and develop ourselves beyond the arbitrary limits we place on ourselves from not knowing and resisting the unknown. So the challenge here is that we absorb and grasp and implement all the ideas that's possible from the master intelligences through these inquiries to these specialists, these implementations of the best sources for particular inquiries. And this is, in my view, our next best step in our evolution of what we are and what we can be. Because this expands our possibilities beyond just like what we can see to what we can sense, what we can think, what we can feel. And that extends into this other vast universal intelligence network that is available to us at any time and is going on all the time, many times without us even knowing. So I just wanted to share this theory with you. I wanted to do it on a live kind of format because it seemed interesting. It seemed like a good way to introduce these ideas to you and to kind of give you a glimpse into what it is that I'm seeing and what I've experienced. I have a massive amount of information and knowledge that's come to me written, and I'm trying to share that through this podcast. And I hope you'll join me and include your insights and wisdom into this process through this conversational model, through this asking and receiving information and ideas, and then the implementation of these ideas, because they are truly much bigger and larger and more interesting than anything that we've seen as a result of our knowledge in the world. So that's my this is my way of sharing my ideas, my theories on this particular thing, and I'm going to expand on it in the future and would love to hear from you. I would love to have conversations. If you want to make comments and connect with me, I would love that also. And I'm going to keep sharing and developing these ideas. And hopefully, eventually, we can all have this kind of connection and be involved in this amazing, amazing process of making friendships, of learning, developing greater wisdom, and being able to expand to our highest possibilities of humans. So I'm going to do the close here and want to tell you that I love you and I appreciate your consideration and your ideas in this regard. And we'll do this again soon. Thank you.